We continue with the aftermath of yesterday's terrorist attack in downtown Manhattan. Joining me now is Fran Townsend, the former Homeland Security Advisor to President George W. Bush. I'm pleased to have her here. Update me in terms of where we are and the more information we've gained since you and I talked this morning.
Well, Charlie, he's being arraigned any minute now on charges here in New York City. He's been talking to the FBI, which was not true this morning. In fact, there are reports that he asked the FBI to hang an ISIS flag in his hospital room. He was bragging about the attack. We know now that he planned it for several weeks. He went on test runs. There was an individual with him just before he tragically mowed down these people, and they're looking for that individual who also, Charlie, called the suspect's cell phone after the attack. And so he's high on the list. The other thing that's going on right now is because of his immigration status, you mentioned he got in on this visa. He then became a permanent resident alien, which means he had all the protections of a U.S. citizen. It allowed him to sponsor others, what we call chain migration. And so we are hearing from law enforcement sources that he may have sponsored up to 9 people. Law enforcement officials are now looking for those 9 people because they want to know, are those good guys or bad guys? What was his motivation? What we're learning about his motivation is it was ISIS-related. He may have had contact with individuals of ISIS overseas, and they're looking into that now. He claims to have been self-radicalized. But we're learning more. So one of the last things I'll say that we learned about what was in the car, we know he got out with this paintball gun and a BB gun. And everyone's asked the question, why, right? In the ISIS playbook, as we call it, they say get out of the car with either knives or guns. Turns out, Charlie, there were knives recovered in the car. And what happened was when he hit the school bus, the knives went out of where he could reach them quickly, and so he got out of the car with these fake guns.
So if he'd had knives, he might have tried to kill some people and then been killed in them.
That's right, and what he's saying is he intended to go from where he was if he hadn't had the car accident to the Brooklyn Bridge, which is very reminiscent of the attack in London. And so it is clear that this is a terrorism investigation, a terrorism incident. What is unclear to me is how much contact did he have with ISIS overseas, but it may very well be this is the bleed out that we expected when ISIS is feeling pressure in places as they have, in places like Iraq and Syria. They're going to act out in other places in other ways, and this may be exactly what happened yesterday here in New York.
What can we do as a society to prevent this? Clearly, the best intelligence is a very good way.
Right.
If you know it's coming, then you can do more. If you know who's likely to commit an act, you can do more with surveillance and everything else.
That's right.
You've got to have good intelligence. That depends on a good relationship with communities. A person with intent to do that might be living in. What else?
Well, you know, we protect infrastructure in public places as best we can. Think of areas in Times Square around the 9/11 memorial. But this bike path that runs the length of the West Side Highway, for those watching who are not from New York, the entire length of practically of Manhattan, that's impossible. It's right next to a 6 or 8 lane highway. And so things like that are really impossible to protect. And so you take a cut at that in different ways. The NYPD had reached out after the Nice Promenade truck that mowed down people there in France, reached out to 148 different truck rental companies. Just like when we saw the backpack bomb that was a liquid bomb, they reached out to the suppliers of these sort of component parts. You try to chip away at the threat in a number of different areas. The other thing is, as you mentioned, Charlie, you look at immigration, you look at communities. Oftentimes when people immigrate from Muslim countries, their center of socialization here in the United States becomes the mosque. And it's not sort of a community center that exposes them to the larger community and more likely assimilates them.
Have we made any progress in the effort to offer an alternative argument to someone who's likely to be susceptible?
No, I don't think we have. Look, I also don't think, in fairness, multiple administrations, including the Bush administration, which I was a part of, have failed at this. I've come to the conclusion that it doesn't work very well coming from a Western voice, and especially it doesn't work coming from a Western government voice. You need credible voices in the region. I think the reforms that we see in Saudi Arabia are a very good start. This is the seat of Islam, the site of the 2 holy mosques in Mecca and Medina. They have great authority in the Muslim world, and when the new Crown Prince says he's going to return Saudi Arabia to a more moderate form of Islam, that can have enormous impact on Muslims worldwide. And so I take that as a hopeful sign.
So New York Police Department is as good as it gets on this.
It is, absolutely. They're the best.
And they look for, I mean, clearly the thing that you worry about, too, is copycats. People who might see this, as happened in Europe.
Right.
When there was one incident, there would be another incident in another city.
Correct.
Is there anything we can do about that?
Not really. I mean, look, what you want to do is share the information, what you're learning in real time. And the NYPD is very good about pushing that information out to other major metropolitan areas and police departments. And you want to understand, it's why looking for the 9 people he may have sponsored is important. It's why finding the guy who was with him just before he mowed people down is important. Because what you want to do is understand, is there a network? What can we know about it? What prompted him at that point in time to commit